in opening up, outside A. In closing gov, you have Trans Pina Colada Partnership. Is that correct?
Yep.
And the last team on the closing opposition, we only need 7 at sushi. Yes. Right. My name is Andre. I'll be your chair. In this round, we've got Jian, Pope, Yoya, and Annie on the panel. Before we start, I'd like to congratulate all teams for making it to the pre-quarterfinals. Right. On the motion that suggests that it is never justified to assassinate state-sponsored scientists and researchers conducting research into weapons of mass destruction, we invite the Prime Minister to begin the case that stands in their name. Here.
We want to say that our government side actually concedes to the fact that if we presume the motion situation, that some scientists and some researchers are conducting research into weapons of mass destruction, there is the problems that exist. We actually concede to that those kind of facts. But we believe, our government side believes that if once we want to rectify those kind of problems, we have to attack the root cause of those kind of problems, not attacking and assassinating the scientists who are making this kind of weapons. Because we believe, firstly, scientists are not the decision makers of this kind of weapon making, and secondly, we believe that this kind of weapon making is according to the context of some kind of countries and circumstances. So we believe that actually assassinating scientists will never solve the problem, but will actually cause some kind of backlash. So we believe that we are strongly proposed to this motion. So I asked the Prime Minister, I want to just simply define a few key terms of today's motion. Today's motion is this House believes that it is never justified to assassinate state-sponsored scientists and researchers on conducting research into weapons of mass destruction. Researchers and scientists can be any researchers that is receiving funded funds by the government, and we believe that weapons of mass destruction can be any weapons related to the killing someone or eradicating some human population. So beyond those kind of things, I would like to go on to our team's constructives. Today, our team is going to talk about firstly about the principal analysis of today's motion, and secondly about the practical analysis. Firstly, about the principal analysis, I have 3 levels of analysis in this argument. Firstly, we want to say that scientists are a really kind of innocent entity because of the two reasons. Firstly, they have never committed a crime yet. Even though they are kind of having the research of the mass destruction, they have never murdered someone, and they haven't done something wrong, whatever happens in the future or so. And secondly, scientists are actually someone who is providing scientific opinions and who are actually conducting the researches, and decision making is done by the authority of the government. So they are not the ones who are making the decision, and they are not the ones who are actually making, and they are determined to kill someone, but they are not the decision maker. And especially in the authoritarian governments, such as North Korea or other states, regardless of the consent of the scientists, they are made kind of forced to opt into this kind of researches because authoritarian governments will force them to do so. And my second level analysis, our government side strongly believe that life is a really kind of important thing. We believe that end of someone's life by someone else can be never justified because we don't want to respond violence to violence, and because it will actually call for other kind of violence if we react violence to violence. And actually, we want to question that the government is the government a legitimate entity to actually get rid of someone's life and eliminate someone's life. And we want to question if the government is kind of legitimate illegitimate for this kind of things. And third level analysis, I want to say that especially in this kind of case, where scientists are really kind of innocent, as I characterized before, it is more unjustifiable to actually end someone's life because life is important in the first place. And if it is talking about the innocent people, it is more unjustifiable to end someone's life. So this was my first argument, and yes, sir.
Okay, for example, the backyard soldier in the military who do not directly kill someone or who is not direct decision maker can be the target of military attack. What is the difference between these kind of soldiers and scientists?
We believe the scientists and the soldiers are totally different because soldiers who are making the decision and I have to kill these people, but scientists are just making the researches, and as I characterized before and clear stage officer, scientists haven't done something wrong yet. They are just making the researches of the mass destruction. The soldiers are actually taking into action that they actually killed someone and they had an action. They did something wrong. So we believe that there is a totally different cases. And the second argument is about the practical level analysis. And as I told you before, we actually concede to the fact that this assassination is actually aiming for the peace law. Peace, I believe the opposition side will think like that way. But we believe that to attain those kind of peace, also the process has to be peaceful as well. Because if we don't achieve this kind of peace in a peaceful way, there will be a lot of backlash, and we believe this kind of motion is a really kind of inefficient way to achieve those kind of peace. Because firstly, we believe that this kind of researches regarding related to the mass destruction, the government will put a lot of money because the mass destruction weapons are not really cheap, so it will really cost a lot. So if the government decided to do so, there will be enough circumstances and enough the reason why they want to opt in this kind of mass destruction weapon making. For example, there will be some kind of economic deprivation of the one country, or maybe they have a rival states and rival nations against them, so they are actually maybe they have enough reason why to opt into this kind of research. So this kind of reasons can be led to the researches of the mass destruction. So we believe that assassinating this kind of scientists are not actually attacking the root cause, but and also it is not the real solution to the root cause. And we believe that instead of actually assassinating those kind of people, which is not attacking the root cause, which is the context of the countries, we believe that diplomacy, by solving this kind of problems with the diplomacy, we can actually moderate the tensions between those kind of countries. But if we assassinate this kind of people, if we assassinate the other countries' people, other countries' scientists, it is actually will cause the conflicts between the two countries because it is actually assassinating the foreigners. So there will be some diplomatic problems between two states, and our Deputy Prime Minister will furthermore talk about this kind of situations. So today, Mr. and Madam Speaker, we talked to you about the principle level analysis, that we are saying that first life is really important, and secondly, it is more important if that entity is innocent. And we have told you the scientists are really kind of innocent entity, and they are not related to the exact decision making or compared to other entities. And secondly, we told you that about the practical level analysis, and it will be the not efficient way to attack the root cause of the problems, but it will be actually causing more backlashes and more conflicts between the society. So therefore, I'm very proud to propose this.
All right, thank you, Prime Minister, for that speech. And now, to open debate from the side of opposition, I invite the leader of opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This thing we bought as a souvenir for ourselves in a place where we worship the God for academics. So, right. Anyway, let's hope God of academics will love this. So, ladies and gentlemen, what we heard from the government bench was that this is wrong because the process is wrong. Ladies and gentlemen, we tell you that that is not a good enough reason to propose this motion. The motion suggests that like it's never okay. So they have to generally tell us why it is never okay to assassinate people in all cases. On the other side, the burden on our side of the house is to provide you a case where we think it can be justified. So the specific case we're going to justify are, for example, where we offer like multiple times of amnesties to like we as Western states offer amnesty to these scientists, but they refuse. They continue to be involved in the development and all these kind of things. We do try other measures, and we're also when we do think that this is effective and there is a small chances of backlashes, and that is the cases we actually propose. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to talk about basically two things as for our positive material. I'm going to talk about the general justification of why we can actually defend our case, even though we are actually targeting civilians. We actually can have a justification. And secondly, I'm going to talk about why we think that, well, to actually make the negotiation and the diplomacy, which is what government supports, effective, ladies and gentlemen, we need to actually be tough on these rogue nations to some extent. And we think that is the only way we can actually tackle the root cause, which the government is concerned about. But before that, let's give a couple of rebuttals to what we heard. So they have told us that, well, these scientists are not the decision makers, and therefore it is wrong to tackle them. We say, firstly, we have measures to actually engage with the decision makers. That is diplomacy, ladies and gentlemen, and we agree with the government bench. But like I'm going to tell you, is that this diplomacy process is going to be made better when we actually have a punitive action at the end of the negotiation. But secondly, they have told us that these scientists have done nothing wrong. First of all, we think in most cases they know that this weapon of mass destruction is probably going to be used in a way to kill other people. They don't engage in chemical weapon making, ladies and gentlemen, not thinking that this weapon is going to be used for curing diseases, ladies and gentlemen. They are specialists. They know what they are doing, ladies and gentlemen. So at that point, we can tell you that they are completely complicit in the process of planning to kill someone, and we think that is a crime in and of itself. But secondly, they have told us that these scientists are sometimes forced. Yes, if they are forced, maybe we wouldn't really assassinate them. But we are talking about cases where we can actually have access to these scientists. Now, when you are planning assassination, obviously you have access to that person. And if like our espionage can reach and access these people and say that we're going to offer amnesty to you and your families, come to America, and if you don't, we're going to kill you. And if they don't come, we will kill them. That is a case we're going to defend. They have told us that life is generally important and therefore it is wrong to assassinate. First of all, we agree number is important. But the thing is, if you don't act in a punitive way, you will have more lives being lost on their side of the house. So in terms of the number of lives we can save, we think we take this debate. But secondly, they have told us that, well, just saying that life is important is not enough to defend in this case, because the motion requires them to specifically tell us why it's wrong to take the lives of those sponsored scientists. So they think, on their side of the house, they genuinely agree that sometimes assassination can be justified, because that's what the motion requires. If they are non-sponsored scientists, they have to defend that assassination is okay. Then they told us that the process has to be peaceful in order to be good, because there's going to be a lot of backlash. First of all, we think that Western states are not that crazy. They don't go around assassinating Vladimir Putin because they are fearing backlash. They do go in to kill people like Osama bin Laden because they know that this person is like losing power to some extent, and therefore it is effective. And as a fact, the activity of terrorists like Al-Qaeda has increased after the assassination. So do have a careful calculation on what the backlashes would be, and these are the cases where the backlash is expected to be not that large, ladies and gentlemen, are the cases we are going to support on our side of the house. So what are the justification? First of all, let's be clear that this weapon of mass destruction is very, 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 very dangerous, ladies and gentlemen. The fact that it's actually killing, it's an inhumane weapon, which can actually kill people indiscriminately, means that it can kill civilians, or not just like soldiers, but civilians, ladies and gentlemen. And you can't control where the amount of the damage. And that is, therefore, we think it's a horrid weapon to create in the first place. But secondly, ladies and gentlemen, they may say that, well, it is a state strategy to be involved in the development. So why do you have the right to invade in their sovereign right to create these weapons in the first place? We say a few things. First of all, we think, generally, Western states have an idea that it is inhumane to develop these weapons, and that's why they have signed things like the NPTs, or they have joined notices signed the ICC, because they think that it's simply wrong to use these weapons, ladies and gentlemen. So then, why do we think that Western states are justified to extend their belief of what the world should be to other nations? It's simply because of accountability to its citizens. Now, when American citizens voted for their president to sign NPT, the citizens didn't say that weapons of mass destruction should not be used by Americans. They voted for the general belief that weapons of mass destruction are simply abhorrent and should not be used regardless of who is going to be used and who is going to be used against, ladies and gentlemen. And that is why we think that we have a justification to actually to spread that belief to other states in the first place. But secondly, we think that assassination can be justified because it is quick and effective. And seeing the nature of weapons of mass destruction, it is important that we take a preemptive measure. Because one, when it is used, or when it is made in the first place, ladies and gentlemen, it's hard to actually attack them, because once they use it as a revenge, it's going to destroy our nation and the rest of the world as well. So therefore, the preemptive attack of actually attacking the knowledge, the person who has knowledge and the know-how to create it, is the best option, ladies and gentlemen. And that is why we think assassination is the most effective way of tackling this proposal in some cases. Lastly, quickly on negotiation. Negotiation, ladies and gentlemen, does not work because, unless they think there is an imminent threat coming to them. Dictators are just going to just take on all the aid, or take on all the offerings coming from the Western states, and then if they think that West is not going to act and actually being tough on you, they're not going to go in a peaceful way. That's what happens in places like North Korea. Now, they are now actually accepting some offerings from America, but they know that America is not going to attack them, and therefore there's not much incentive for them to actually listen and actually destroy the nuclear weapon that they have created. So if, ladies and gentlemen, if we had been taking preemptive measures to knock down these kind of incentives, we think the world would have been a better place. Ladies and gentlemen, we beg to oppose. Thank you very much.
Alright, thank the Leader of Opposition for his speech. And now to continue the side of the government, I invite Deputy Prime Minister If here.
World peace is not achieved when a country kills another country's person, but the peace is brought when the two leaders of two rivaling countries come in front of the camera and shake hands. And we believe that that is the world, the proposition the government today tries to propose to you, and tell you why violence should never be responded with violence, and how it's going to lead to even more violence and escalation of tensions. And before I move on to my constructors, I'd like to bring a few refutations to the opposition's case. So they tell us about the effectiveness of diplomacy and how it can be hindered by actually not assassinating these individuals. First, I have to ask, if the ways of their diplomacy is so effective, even on individual level, I question why the research of weapons of mass destruction is happening in the first place. But I'll take their case and give the best scenario where there are evil intended scientists who are actually researching in order to kill other people, which I find highly unlikely, because the purpose of these scientists are not really evil villains who are out there to kill other people, but rather just trying to research on their field and doing their best as scientists. But let's say that they have their evil intentions. Still, we believe that these individuals should never be an exception to the principal argument we brought to you, how life is valuable. Their plan to kill has not been succeeded yet. No one has been killed yet in reality, and we believe that this is a good enough justification for you, that because life is important, even if the life is or has been planning to murder other people, when he or she hasn't murdered another, no government entity has the right to infringe upon the person's right to live. this is the principal stance the government provides to you today. But then moving on, let's talk about the diplomacy. First, I tell you, because these individuals are very valuable to the host country as well, we believe that we find the diplomacy and their providing amnesty is very unlikely, because either they're killed by the host country if they leave the country and accept the other country's chance, or if they don't, they're killed by another country. We believe that it is a very wrong choice to force upon an individual who hasn't done any crime yet. Thus, I believe that it is principally unjustifiable for any government to do such thing to an individual. But then, let's talk about the danger of mass destruction. We agree that this mass destruction is very dangerous and preemptive measures will be nice. But then that is exactly what we told you when we should consider the context and the reasons behind the research and the creation of mass destruction. We do not believe that US and North Korea is studying deals because US sent an espionage to actually kill an individual in North Korea studying nuclear weapons. Rather, I believe that it's the economic sanctions, the other ways that the US has used to actually force North Korea into certain circumstances that has led the leader of North Korea come to the deal table. And we believe that these are the better peaceful preemptive measures, rather than simply responding to violence to an individual who is not even the decision maker. Thus, I believe that their measures fall. But then what is my concern? I will tell you how this increased espionage will worsen the conflicts not only on international levels, but also in domestic levels. First, in international levels. I told you that the government's responsibility is to protect its own people, and especially when these technicians and scientists are so important in their major program, there is high incentive for these states to actually provide full protection. And when such individual of a state is assassinated by another nation's person, we believe that it's highly likely that the state will retaliate in some way, whether it will be a defensive measure where they accelerate their program to research mass destruction weapon, or whether it is actually economic sanctions or whatnot. We still believe that there will be retaliation, whether it is in form of violence or whatnot, and that is escalating the tension in this world, which we do not want for the peace and the stability of today's economic and international world. But then what happens in the domestic level? We believe that such distrust between other countries and such narrative that there's prevalent espionage out there to kill our own civilians or our own scientists is very hurtful to the domestic level as well. Why is this though? Because this allows the government to use the very dangerous ideology and narrative to demonize other country and justifies their action of media control of falsely accusing some people. For example, during the Cold War, U.S. actively falsely accused some people for being spies from Russia when they were innocent. And in the case of Castro administration in Cuba, they actively controlled media and religion and justified it as a response to fear of U.S. espionage. Such as these examples, I believe that it is very hurtful for domestic level and the civilians of the own country that actually performs assassination on the other country, because it now enables the government to use the narrative that there are certain espionage, they're out to kill you maybe when you are innocent, and that actually consolidates the government's power and the administration, which enables them to use some kind of authoritarian measures such as controlling the media and falsely accusing other people and not being held accountable of their such bad actions. Yes?
Do you agree with things like going into, like for example, NATO going into Rwanda to save people? It actually may cause risk of increased hostility towards West and revenges and all that.
Okay, first, I think it is very different when violence is already happening. I think there's a difference between entering a war with soldiers who have fully consented that they will be actively performing violence on other human beings, compared to scientists who are in their labs and actually studying in their field without having full intention or full control over how their development and how their research is going to be used on other people. I think there is a very big difference between the intention of a soldier and a scientist, because a scientist, unlike soldier, does not have full control over and thus cannot be fully intentional when it comes to the use of mass destruction. Thus, I believe that this is another reason why the killing of scientists can never be justified, because in order for you to actually criminally even accuse someone, you have to fulfill the three criteria of intentional awareness and harm. And in this case, the intention and harm is very unlikely to be accountable for the scientists because they do not have the intention or control over the use of destruction and mass weapons, but then they also do not really have done any harm in the status quo because the mass destruction weapon has not been used yet. So I believe that it is the opening government who has brought to you the principal argument that in such cases in the scientists, their right to live, their life, cannot ever be infringed upon by another government entity, but it also tells you how it can actually escalate the tension not only in international level, but also in domestic level, that it actually increases the call for violence, that it increases the acceleration of these research into mass destruction. Thus, I believe that it is the opening government who tells you how the peace can be actually achieved in today's world. Thank you.
Right, I think the Deputy Prime Minister for his speech. And now we continue the side of opposition. I invite Deputy Speaker.
Two issues from Deputy Prime Leader of Firstly, the analysis of assassination, principle of assassination, and why the characterization of state-sponsored scientists apply the standard to assassinate individuals. Secondly, the practicality of the assassination. But before that, 2 points rebuttal to the Prime Minister and Deputy Prime Minister. Firstly, in terms of other solution, like for example, peaceful negotiation or the economic sanction. Firstly, obviously, this is not mutually exclusive. We think that having the option of the assassination in and of itself is a debate in the first place. And secondly, the economic sanction also damages the country. Like for example, citizens have to hunger and have to suffer from the starvation. And actually, the development of the nuclear weapon or chemical weapon do not budget for this kind of situation. Things is not changing in the first place. We think that's why the peaceful solution sometimes fail and harm to the innocent civilian, and we think this is problematic. That's why having the option of assassination is fundamentally important. Secondly, they mentioned that the conflict happens inside the country. Firstly, the assassination is comparatively less conflicting option of the military strategy. Because like for example, military intervention in the large scale, we think that assassination is a secret mission of a small number of very, very well-trained soldiers and anonymize the country, anonymize the individual, and secretly assassinate these kind of scientists. We think that's why that even though assassination happens, actually the country cannot know who exactly the country that people who assassinate you. We think this situation is less likely to happen compared with military attack. Because actually, if this kind of nuclear development is significantly developed, in this situation we have to bomb the, like for example, nuclear factory or bomb the land, or the military intervention is necessary. We think that more people die or more conflict happen. We think this situation is particularly problematic. And more than that, we say not only this kind of assassination, but also the other way is also have the conflicting in the first place. Like for example, economic sanction always also this kind of the anger of the country happens, and we think this kind of tension is also increasing. That's why as long as they fail to explain why the inequity, the assassination is less likely, highly likely to have the tendency to be the conflict, we think their case must pause. Closing.
Okay, so inventions or research of like weapons are in most, let's say, all cases are done by the large number of groups of researchers. Are you going to assassinate the whole group of researchers?
Yes, we think that we analyze this kind of group of research, but in many cases, the leader of the researcher is main brain of this kind of country, and if necessary, we are more than happy to kill more if negotiations fail. We think this kind of strategy depends on the country to country or the strategy context to the context, and we think the best strategy can be taken by the NATO or the United Nations military or the American militaries. We think the professional can understand this kind of what is the most effective assassination if assassination is necessary. So, first argument about analysis of the assassination. So characterization, firstly, we think assassination or killing somebody in the conflicted or international military strategy in and of itself is a legitimate diplomatic strategy. General Gaddafi are assassinated, or Osama bin Laden are assassinated, even though who directly do not engage killing somebody. We think that this is legitimate military strategy in the first place, Because secondly, in terms of analogy of the soldiers, because soldiers, even though they do not directly engage, like for example, just supplying food of the backyard of the military, or just to do the operation, even in this situation, they sometimes be the target of the military. That's why even though this is not actually directly harm, even though this is just indirect harm, still we can justify to killing somebody in the first places. So why this is they aware, they understand this situation, because even though the scientists understand this is obviously not the peaceful way, and they understand this situation, that's why they are in consent to do this kind of involving the mass destruction in the first place. We think this must be problematic. And more than that, even if some coerciveness exists, still this is applicable to the soldiers who do not involve direct military actions. Because soldiers are sometimes forced to be the soldier because there is no option except for to be the soldiers. In this particular situation, we can justify attacking the soldiers. That's why there is no qualitative difference between, like, for example, politicians and innocent politicians or the soldiers and these kind of state-sponsored scientists. That's why I say this is not the case. And more than that, just planning is also the target of the military action. Like, for example, planning terrorism is obviously preemptive attack on the military basis. We think that's why that just intention is okay to justify to assassinate. Yes, madam.
Can you please explain to us how your measure is preemptive when the technology moves on while an individual may be dead as a
Yes, that's exactly the second argument. But before that, even if life is an important principle stands, still this is more life can be solved by outside the house utilitarian under the utilitarian calculus. Like, for example, if the bombing the nuclear development faculty, in this case there is risk of breaking the radioactive or the chemical substances. In this case, more innocent civilians unfortunately die. Within this situation is massively significant. And if these kind of chemical weapon or nuclear weapon are succeed and developed and they can use in this situation, like for example Syria, the chemical weapon killed lots of people and suffer, and this is particularly problematic. That's why the small number of killing assassination of scientists can be utilitarianly justified. So let's talk about practicality. Firstly, we think this can stop the development because the knowledge is the basic of the development. Because even though they have the experiment machine, even though they have the development machine, still how to operate and do not understand the theory of the quantitative science or physics. In this case, they are more likely to fail the experiment of development. And more than that, we say the number of elite is limited because in the context of a dictatorship country, in many cases they prohibit to study developed country, Western country, prohibit to study in this kind of their own country. In this case, education is particularly time wasting, and in this case, they are more if they're killing the leader or the brain of this kind of group of scientists. In this case, we can more likely to stop the development in the first place. And secondly, we say this is simply the diplomatic power is also changing because if the scientists die and major scientists die or escape to the United States, in this case, is that country understands this is difficult, but this take more time to develop the complete the nuclear weapon or chemical weapon. This is more likely to agree and success the negotiation. If the scientists leave, in this context, they are more likely to take the tough stance on the United States or other kind of treatment. We think this is massively significant because lots of people unfortunately die as a success of the development. We think that this situation is vulnerable. We are very proud to oppose.
Thank you, Leader of Opposition, for his speech. And now let's move on to the closing house. We invite the member of GOP to open the debate to decide the closing house. ladies and gentlemen, assumption is not a justification. When this debate is about justification, that is to say side effect or aftermath, that is like deteriorating like diplomacy is quite different, right? Because you cannot calculate before it happens, right? We have to think about when you can take people's life away, or whether those researchers' scientists are completely or like explicitly relevant or responsible for those outcomes that are say massacres. We think this is something that can never be justified in all cases. That is the burden of proof of our side, right? I'm going to talk about mainly two things in this speech. First of all, I'm going to talk about like, what is essential to justify assassination in this case, which was completely lacking from open government. And secondly, I'm going to take a very deep look about whether those scientists or researchers can be like, explicitly responsible to be like murdered or assassinated for the indirect outcomes. But before that, let's engage with the opening government, right? So opening government said that they try to predict some very specific cases, and one of the examples they say from the private a leader of opposition is like they offer like so much amnesty, but they don't give up, so we would assassinate them, right? Right. First of all, but however, I cannot never find any examples throughout the history when you offer so many amnesties to the researchers, but you find that they don't give up. So I don't think they can. I don't think they really prove some specific cases, right? Right. And also they talked about they're going to take a preemptive measures because knowledge is something they want to attack, but we cannot find what is the justification on their side of how. Then when I ask a POI whether you're going to assassinate the whole group of researchers who are involved, the answer coming from the deputy leader of opposition is that they'll only kill the leader, right? This is a point that when they became contradictory because they said that they want to eradicate or kill the life of person who have the knowledge for the massacre, but they say only kill the leader, which means that other members in the group who does actually have the knowledge for those creation of weapons are not going to be assassinated or will remain alive. Inconsistency is his killing their case. Then they ran away with saying that probably they're going to take the best strategy possible. Well, I don't know what that is. They never crystallized those kind of specific cases they're trying to protect. I think the opening government is already behind this debate. So let's move on to the first point. So what is essential to justify assassination? And this was completely lacking from the opening happened. We think in general, when you try to take people's life away from the outcomes that they have done, you have to absolutely clear with the extent of responsibility or the content of the actions that they did in order to justify assassination. We think the relevant analogy to this is the punishment to war criminals or the prisoners of war, right? Because after you're going to have war trials, and you're going to be very clear, and you're going to investigate what kind of things they did, how many people they killed, in what phases of those kind of missions they are involved. We think this is something are necessary to justify to kill or the punishment, right? Especially in taking people's lives, that is the capital punishment, for example, which is the most heaviest punishment available. This is a moment that you have to be extremely careful about about the extent of responsibility they have, right? So let's move on to the second point. So the question here is whether those researchers are responsible, are criminally liable for the outcomes for the researches that they have conducted, right? Opening government had a one-liner assertion that the researchers are coerced. So firstly, I'm going to examine how to fill in the mechanism of the opening government that they never did. So why researchers are coerced to do those research, therefore they are not being responsible for these kind of massacres. But before that, yes.
Okay, unfortunately, when you take on military action, you often do kill a lot of people, soldiers, due to collateral damages. And unfortunately, these people are not tried, but that happens sometimes, and it's justified.
Okay, the thing is, in a complicated situation, the war group, a battlefield, for example, you might not be able to conduct a specific investigation, for example, if that is what you're trying to say in a POI. But in the case of research institutes or those people which is far away from battlegrounds, I think this is a point. If you want to investigate, you can, right? So first point. We think that scientists of research are coerced in the many cases, right? I'm going to fill in the mechanism of opening government to hide this argument, right? So why are they coerced to do those research? We think, especially in the oppressive regimes, the state themselves, does grip the life of the researchers or the life of the family of the researchers. Why is that? Because the researchers cannot like conduct their own research by themselves. They do not have like enough capital or money to investigate for themselves for their own researches. Right? We think that the state or government is the one who is providing the fundings, who are providing the salaries, and if those state wants that particular research is actually, it could be me, for example, because I am in the applied chemistry department of Boston University, they might like headhunt me, right? If I reject those kind of headhunting from the government or state, especially in war, when the war is involved, we think that's the moment where the state is going to cut off any funding to my own research, to cut off any researches, right? What a CEO might talk about like private institutions, but especially in the like oppressive regime, we don't think that private institution is going to be available or to like research those issues. Like, because of this creation of weapons is closely connected with the usage of military or national defense or lots of things, it is nothing. National defense, we don't think a private institution is going to be responsible for creation of like those weapons. Therefore, because the state grips those lives of those researchers, they're going to be coerced to do so. But even if they are not coerced, why they are not responsible, right? First case that we're going to see is that when they are not aware of the potential, right? Simply, when the scientists or researchers are not aware of the potential, they're not having an overlook of the creation of the weapon. That is, they only take part in specific phases of a creation. That is, they're just making a chemical reaction. They're like making the carbon-to-carbon bonds in the chemical weapons. I don't think they're responsible for a whole massacre. But even if they're aware of the potential, we don't think they can be justified, right? The one who did not like detonate hydrogen bombs, the one who did not like spread bacillus anthracis, that is to say that the very vicious bioweapon, those are the ones who did not are directly involved with the massacres, right? We don't think the outcome of massacre was not directly derived from the actions of those researchers. That is the point. That is the moment when those researchers are not completely responsible for the massacre they have done, right? So the CEO has to talk about why they're concretely, crystally responsible for the massacre that they talk about. We think this is something never justified in all cases. We beg to vote.
All right, I thank the member of Parliament for that speech. And now to continue our opposition time by member of opposition, please.
So there was a clash in the opening half about whether or not these people are justified in terms of us being able to assassinate them. Right? In our opening half, I think, gave us somewhat of a convincing criteria by telling us that, well, these people are intentionally trying to kill them because they have the knowledge, because they have the research, and they have the know-how in order to create and test these weapons of mass destruction. Right? What we're going to do is take a harder stance and give you a stronger rationale as to why they deserve death penalty, basically death. And that is because the product of their research is currently being used to kill people, right? Their products of their research are currently cross-fertilized across different sectors of technology, right? Like, for example, if you're a top researcher and you make weapons that have nuclear reactions and that, like, for example, release tons of electrons, that same sort of weapon, for example, in Russia, is going to be used by Vladimir Putin to develop chemical weapons against his enemies, against religious groups that are resisting him. These people are murderers in the status quo. That's why it's justified to take their life. We're taking a harder stance than our government. At the same time, we'll refute everything you heard from the opening half, right? This is what this debate is about. If you want a justification, please pay attention to our speech, right? First of all, okay, let's give you specific contextual characterizations about in what cases these weapons are actually being used to kill the people. We say, for example, in Turkey, where researchers are creating weapons are creating nuclear weapons. But these weapons are being the data for these weapons are being transferred into chemical weapons, to being, for example, killing the Kurdish rebels in that country, or killing religious minorities, or being sent and externalized to foreign governments and infiltrating and killing their people as well, right? So I think and obviously these scientists are not unaware of the harms closing government wants to say, right? In the United States, if you're a nuclear researcher, you literally have to go to New Mexico, stand behind glass doors, and see the gigantic explosion, the nuclear mushroom that happened, right? You can visibly associate the damage with the production and the process through which you create that, right? It's very, very unlikely that these guys are unintentionally, or they don't know what the harm is, right? Well, so now let's talk about why is it justified to preemptively kill these people, right? It's justified, we think, because if you stop these, because as we told you, right now in the current status quo, these weapons are being transferred to other contexts and killing other people. What we say is that under the principle of utilitarianism, we think it's also beneficial that we preemptively kill these scientists, right? We think the principle here is that every life is equal, and that we can quantify the value of every life. Let's say every life is one unit, and you take out the scientist who is principally responsible for making that weapon. He has the knowledge, he has the data, he has the extreme experience and know-how. If you get rid of him, you probably disrupt the production of these chemical weapons, or you give a superior advantage for other countries to try and take a harder stance, to try and push their sanctions harder, because now the other country has less leverage, right? What this essentially means is that you are able to save more lives under our side, right? It's principally justified, right? That's what this motion is asking for, right? So we believe that is okay. Sorry, next. So let's talk about let's talk about the intentionality, right? Because for some reason we think that the open government tried to co-opt this principle of intentionality by telling you well, sometimes they just don't know what's going to happen, right? But being a nuclear engineer, working directly under the government, you know going into that job that there's a possibility that you will forever be remembered as an evil genius. You will be forever remembered as a person who developed a weapon that massacred. Even if the potential is ambiguous for that weapon to be used, you know, right, the fact that if it is used, you're okay with the fact of people vilifying your name years after you are died, right? That means that you're not some nice person who's trying to use this nuclear energy just so your country can defend itself. You're probably someone who's more cold-blooded, someone who's okay with your country for using this weapon against other countries, right? And notice the fact that there's an opportunity cost, an extremely high opportunity cost for being an engineer, right? Because in some countries, for example, like North Korea or Russia or Turkey, you are principally responsible for the only line of defense that your country has against other nuclearly possessing countries, right? It means that you have such insane pressure on your shoulders. It means that if you go into this job, you concede to the fact that these weapons might be used against other countries. You actively reject other opportunities, going into chemical weapons or going into something that's not so dangerous, right? It means that you have the intention to kill other people, right? So even if intentionality is the case, we think our opening government did a good job by telling you why they might have the intention because they have the knowledge. But what we're bringing to you from the closing government is that they have the intention because of their character, because they make that opportunity cost, because they understand and they're okay with the fact of their name possibly being vilified for the rest of history. I will take closing.
So if you're going to assassinate researchers to take a preemptive measure to eradicate those knowledges or for the future creation, are you going to kill the researcher in all cases?
So we think that under this motion, we think that we'd probably be okay with the fact that if you are someone who contributes to creating if you're a head researcher of an organization, you have the knowledge and you are principally responsible for making those decisions. You have the most knowledge, you have the most experience, you're directly responsible, for example, for putting together the bomb, then we are limiting ourselves to those actors, right? It's your burden of proof to tell us why it's never justified, right? It's our burden of proof to tell you why it's sometimes justified, right? It's sometimes justified for certain people in certain contexts. So obviously, if you are an individual who is a head researcher in laboratory, and obviously you are you are building that weapon, you are intentionally building that weapon, and the product of that weapon is currently being used to kill other people, then obviously we satisfy our burden of proof, right? That POI, we don't understand how it belongs in today's debate. Well, last point, right? What opening government said that wasn't really resolved is, but wait, the threat of espionage or assassination can actually undermine the accountability of citizens because other countries are going to be likely to retaliate, right? Number one, we think that other countries already recognize that they probably can't win a sustained conflict, right? The whole principle of mutually assured destruction, why countries like North Korea don't already retaliate because they already hate the United States, is because they recognize that that satiating their momentary ambition to overcome the United States or to release their anger can be severely outweighed by the fact that their entire country might be blown up when the United States decides to retaliate, right? There's just no, there's no possibility that accountability falls under their side. Remember what closing government gave you. We took the stance that is necessary to justify preemptive killing by telling you that these people are directly murdering others and that under utilitarianism it is justified to take their life right now. And we shut down the intentionality case of opening government, which is why we think we take this debate.
All right, thank you, member of opposition, for the speech. And now to conclude this government, I invite the government.
idea of how they want to win this debate is that they basically think that as long as there's a potential for any government-sponsored scientist technology to fall into nefarious hands, that it's okay for them to assassinate this question, right? They never prove why in this specific case that it's okay. They never, like as Kubo mentioned in his POI, right? They never prove why they were engaging with this specific case where scientists are not coerced and where scientists are willingly engaging into the process, which is what their opening government was trying to prove, right? Their stance only proves that they should kill all scientists who research technology that has a potential to kill people. I have no idea what they're talking about. I think they're automatically out of this debate. I'm going to deal with OG before I deal with opposition bench as a whole, right? Like they pointed out, right? OG really limited this debate to a specific context, right? They talked about the context of authoritarian states, and then they talked about useful preemptive measures, right? I'm going to tell you why, even in their worst case scenario, right? In their best case scenario, where scientists are willingly opting into this process despite being offered amnesty, where diplomacy and all options like economic sanctions have been exhausted, that it's still not okay for them to kill scientists in that situation. And I think because of that, I'm going to win this debate, right? So let's engage them. Let's answer why it's unjustified using their mechanism, which was utilitarianism, right? Throughout the entire bench, that was the only principle, right? They saved more lives. That's not even true, right? If, first of all, government side mentioned retaliation, to which they responded, oh no, it's a secret assassination, no one's going to know. Well, if you assassinate a scientist, a high-level scientist, in a Russian, state, in a Russian state laboratory, who else is Russia going to think is assassinating? Obviously, it's going to be one of their enemies, right? Not one of their allies, right? Naturally, even if they can't pinpoint the exact source of the assassination, they will be able to justify it as some form of retaliation, right? And here's why we execute this argument better than our opening government, because we give you the comparative, right? If we use their mechanism of utilitarianism, right? We say that retaliation from the Russian state to a US assassination is going to kill more lives, right? It's going to kill US civilians as well as Russian civilians in the crossfire that's going to ensue from this context. Why? Because in this context, in the context that they want to talk about, where diplomatic options has been exhausted, this means that tension is really, truly, extremely high. And we think assassination at this point is going to be the tipping scale into full-out warfare, right? They said, no, North Korea has not attacked people, has never retaliated. That's because it's never gotten to a stage where all economic sanctions and all other diplomatic options have been exhausted, right? In that situation, we think it's particularly risky and not in the interest of utilitarianism, and it's going to cost them more lives in their paradigm. More importantly, government side also proved to you that the death of one scientist is not going to stop the entire process, right? Because if it's so necessary at this point that this technology, if this technology is already at a stage where it poses so much of a threat, right, then we think that the entire team is still going to be okay, right? So they don't even prove how they successfully take away the capabilities of the state to really make a thing. More importantly, let's talk about our measure, right, which is responsibility. And this is the measure, the metric that we wanted to talk about. Whether or not scientists are responsible. Opposition bench came up with like an array of examples. They said politicians that opt into conflict are still okay to be assassinated. There's soldiers that even though they're coached into war, they're still okay to be assassinated. And they said, oh, people who plan terrorism are okay, right? Well, let's look at their logic, right? By their logic, the logic that they presented us, right? By their logic, we can kill communities that fund terrorist governments or terrorist organizations, right? Why? Because these communities can actually visualize the impact, right? They know what these terror organizations are doing, and they know that these terror organizations are beheading people, right? And they know directly that their money is going to go towards funding terrorism. So these people are also absolutely complicit, right? And they're the only lifeline that helps these terrorist groups in times where there are sanctions, in times where other resources are being cut off. What does this mean? This means that these communities are also complicit and fall into their acts, right? So in their paradigm, if we extend their principle, it's okay for them to kill communities that pay taxpayer money, or for example, give donations to terrorist organizations and actors of violence, right? We don't think scientists fall under this category. And then they come up and say collateral damage is justified, right? Here's the difference between collateral damage and assassinating a scientist. You don't intend to kill civilians in collateral damage, right? You intend to kill the scientists in the assassination. And we think that's not justified, right? Next, let's deal with OO, right? They said that, oh no, because you're a Western liberal state, in the context of Western democracies, it's okay for them to promote, it's okay for them to deal their ideology, right? We think that's ridiculous, right? So if it's justified, right, for these Western liberal democracies to assassinate people, right, this also means they never proved why uniquely Western democracies have a right to do whatever they want to maintain international order. This means in the norms in their society, it's also okay for Russia to assassinate U.S. engineers, right? It's also okay for Russia to assassinate U.S. scientists. Being a Western state is not a justification to do whatever you want. In fact, we think Western democracies have a higher bar for the kind of justification they need to set. Western democracies are the state that need to look even more at responsibility, even need to think even more about responsibility when they act, right? Because they have a responsibility to set the norms. Yes.
Okay, John von Neumann was Albert Einstein and many nuclear scientists under the Nazi government accept an amnesty from the United States. Factually, don't you think scientists have choice to escape, but some still continue to stick to the position because of salary or honor?
Well, it doesn't matter whether or not they're willing to escape or whether or not, whatever it is, right? They're still at the stage of research, right? So we don't think that we still don't think that they're directly responsible, right? Communities that donate to a terrorist organization like IS still have the ability to just leave, right? But that doesn't mean that we bomb these cities en masse, right? So let's just look at what their world looks like at the end of the day, right? We think what their world looks like is a world where there are no international norms, right? Because in their world, Western liberal democracies, when dealing with these very specific scenarios, can do whatever they want just on the justification of utilitarianism, even though it's not really an effective policy. Right? We think their side is the side where norms really go to shit, and where there's really no more law and order, especially in the cases where, especially in the specific scenarios they wanted to engage in, where tensions are so high, where conflicts are so high. We think it's not wise to make this decision, right? And we think they're the side that really have not thought through their policy. What did we show you, right? We showed you that we showed you clear principles more so than our opening tape about what exactly responsibility means, when responsibility comes in. And we also analyzed through a greater spectrum of actors, where we told you not only do we engage with scientists that are coerced, we also engage with scientists that are not coerced, and we split those into two actors: those who are aware that the potential technology is going to go somewhere, and those who are not aware that the potential technology is going to go somewhere. And we think our strongest example is still the idea that even when scientists know that their research is contributing towards making weapons of production, mass destruction that can be used for violent purposes, that they are still not directly responsible. It's not okay for Western liberal states to directly target these people. For these reasons, very, very proud to do both.
All right, thank the government whip for that speech, and now to conclude the side of opposition, and it's a whole the opposite. Here.
people we are talking about in these assassinations are evil geniuses. For example, geniuses that would have been people like Einstein if he was evil. We believe that especially in these fields of research, there are people who really are driving this research forward. And we know that as a fact through espionage. We don't think as they try to depict the research would still go on even if they assassinate, those countries would assassinate. Because they know through espionage, if we assassinate these researchers, and we know for a fact that we can at least delay this research until, for example, the war is over, the conflict is over, or that we can stop this thing. So obviously, if you go to this act of assassination, or if you go that far, you have a certain extent of certainty that you will delay or stop this development. That is what we're talking about. So the fact that they are saying that other people can continue is out of this debate. So two things to do in this, three things that I want to talk about. First, I want to address the question: is diplomacy an option actually in solving this problem, and what does it matter? Second of all, is it intrinsically okay to kill? No, thank you. Third of all, how complicit are they in the end, and is it enough to kill them? So, first question: is diplomacy an option, or does it matter? So they say that it's not. There are no cases really where you can't use diplomacy, and that there will be backlash if you do so. So what do we think about it? We think there are cases like Nazi Germany, where the legitimacy of the leader or the state is contingent upon something as a hostility towards a certain people, something that just cannot be come to an agreement with. Because Nazi Germany's, for example, legitimacy relied upon the fact that they kill and mass slaughter and torture Jewish people. And we don't believe any state in another world or in the Allies could have accepted that fact and negotiated through that fact. In such a situation, an agreement is just impossible. Diplomacy is impossible when we think about such facts. We believe that is one case where we can see that diplomacy is not possible, meaning that if assassination is working, it's the only option that we really have. And no, thank you. And especially in such a situation, there are also people, like they talked about, like for example Heidegger, the philosopher, that was complicit with the Nazi German state, right? He was actively supporting them and was supporting their philosophy. It is easy to imagine that there are also, if there are such intellectuals support such governments, and also some scientists would support such governments and research them for them willingly and knowingly. Such cases have existed and do exist. But furthermore, what they talk about is about, or G talks about, or CG as well, talks about retaliation, that the backlash would be a lot bigger. What do we think about this? First of all, we're not always talking about pre-war. There are cases where we're already in war, and that backlash is ridiculous because we are already in war. What are we talking about? Retaliation, right? So such cases do exist, and they totally ignore that fact, I believe. And when they're talking about, even if it's pre-war, when we're talking about economic sanctions and stuff, we're talking about a country that is preparing for war, trying to attack us. What do we care about economic sanctions, right? We think this is ridiculous and out of this debate. So we have two options, no thank you, in this world, right? One is we assassinate and delay that with a certainty or stop that research. Or two, we don't assassinate, then we have to prepare for that nuclear war. We also have to do research in mass destruction in order to counter that research. And then, if something happens, we come to a full-out nuclear war on both sides and everybody dies, right? What was a big fear that we had in the 20th century, or still have for the 21st century. Such scenarios do exist. And therefore, we believe backlash is out of this debate, and there are cases where this diplomacy is not an option. Therefore, OG is out of this debate, and CG's point about retaliation as well.
Okay, now can you please explain to us, when we keeping in the circumstances that leads to the mass destruction and research, such as being nations feeling threatened, how is killing a high-class individual from a nation that is being threatened actually help to stop the research, not accelerate it?
Like we said, because that high-class person is driving the research. Obviously, if we know for a fact we are espionage or certain such facts that they are the persons driving, we can stop that thing. And like we said, retaliation and stuff like that is in many cases already out of the options that you have. No, thank you. Second point is then principally okay to kill. Now, what the OG said is life is valuable. But we believe this failure in this point is they never explain why life now of a person is more important than the life in the future of thousands and thousands of people who could have died. They never explained or gave us any reasons about this, right? What could it be? Is it certainty of dying because it's certain that you assassinate, but not certain that they might die? We believe there are cases where the certainty of the fact that they will be killed in the future is so close to reality, well, we can actually look over this point. No, thank you. But if they say life is so important, valuable, then if one life is so important, then thousands and thousands and thousands of lives are even more important than that. So even according to their own principle, they never explain that one life is the same importance of thousands of lives. So that point is invalid. No, thank you. But so furthermore, CG said you need to be crystal clear when you do, and principally you need to be crystal clear, no thank you, to justify any killing. What do we think about this? We believe wars are the preparation for wars, are special situations, not ordinary situations, where the normal rights, the basic rights that we think about in ordinary life, recede to a certain extent, not fully, but to a certain extent. That's why, like OGs and OO said, for example, people work fighting in the backyard, or supplying, no thank you, or supplying the front line, or people who don't know, who are dubious whether they are soldiers or not, and you don't know, even if they get killed. Normal situation, obviously infringement of rights, or we believe in basic, but through war, such things change for a bit, because it's such a harsh situation where people just have to die, and it's inevitable, right? So in such a state, we believe crystal clear is not a necessity that we have to be, because it's not normal war even. So third question, how complicit are they? Is it enough to kill? Our burden of proof, repeatedly we say, we don't have to say in all cases or in various cases. We have to say, give you one case where it might be where it is valid to kill and assassinate such a person. We believe we have fulfilled that burden. CG said like that people are not aware, not coerced, but throughout the explanation of our side, we have shown that it's very possible that in many cases they are actually aware of what they're doing. And even about this coercion, we believe it is invalid. For even if you're coerced to still kill a person because your family is taken hostage, that doesn't mean that is okay in terms of CGS. Same applies to this. And as my partner talked about this cross-fertilization, is that we see how complicit they are actually in this process of mass killing. And we believe for all these reasons that we should oppose this measure.
I think we all listen to me for a speech, and I thank you all for debate. You all across the house is intensely. And your packing things, we will now go back to the hall.